Hey, it's 5.4 video, and the poem we're going to be looking at in this lesson is called Jesus on the Iron Cross. So I'm going to read it first, and then we'll do some SCASI, and then I'm going to introduce a strategy called color marking. So here's the poem, Jesus on the Iron Cross. The strongest boy in our high school on the edge of Detroit did not play sports. He would have had to cut his long blonde Samson hair and put away his switchblade and stop smoking dope. The gone-to-seed coaches who taught gym class hated him for the beauty they could not have, harness, unable to wipe away his grin with endless push-ups. He was the only one who could do the Iron Cross when we did gymnastics. We watched his arms tremble above us as he held the position, worshiping at the temple of the damned. The teachers stood, hands on hips, teaching us nothing, as they always did. I was not literate enough to read their faces as they cursed prayers under their breath, standing beside us as he held the cross until he could no longer and fell to the mats, and we moved on to the rope, to the trampoline or pegboard, as if nothing had happened, lined up in identical blue gym shorts and white Fitzgerald high t-shirts with our last names scrawled in the blue center squares. I didn't need that kind of literacy. I had faith he could rise from the dead whenever he felt like it. All right, I missed the period at the end of this poem in your packet, I think. So if there's no period at the end of the poem, make sure you add one. All right, we have a couple of definitions for us. Iron Cross is a gymnastics skill on the rings in which the body is suspended upright while extending the arms laterally, forming the shape of the Christian cross, requiring significant core, arm, and wrist strength. And then Samson hair. Samson is a biblical figure given superhuman powers by God in the form of extreme strength connected to his long hair. The guiding question, there will be a guiding question on the guided literary essay exam, the in-class test. And so I have one here in this sample as well. It's, how is imagery used in this poem to show the strength of an individual? All right, so let's tackle it. Let's do some SCASI here. First of all, for the setting, we know we're in a gym class in Detroit called Fitzgerald High, right? On the edge of Detroit High School, Fitzgerald High. The characters, we have the strongest boy, who is first described, and he appears to be who is labeled in the title as someone with this long hair who, refuses to cut his hair to play sports or to put away his switchblade and stop smoking dope. He's the only one who can do this difficult sporting event of doing a perfect Iron Cross. And then we have the teachers, who are always described in the plural. There aren't there isn't a singular teacher. They're always the teachers, them, they, right? And they are teaching us nothing. They hate the strongest boy. They're trying to change him into something else, right? But the strongest boy won't bend. And then there's the speaker. He's a student in gym class, and he can't do the Iron Cross. He doesn't like the teachers. He doesn't understand why they didn't like the strongest boy. He also believes in the strongest boy. And then I guess as I was looking more closely, we do also hear about the other high school students. So I could add them as maybe the fourth character, is all of the other students in the class. All right, what's the action? The key action is that students are doing gymnastics and watching the strongest boy pull off the toughest move. The teachers stand with hands on hips, cursing prayers under their breath at the strongest boy. The speaker and other students worship and believe in the strongest boy. The strongest boy eventually falls to the mats, and the others move on to the other gymnastics. How about ideas? Keep this in mind. Use that guiding question to help you to get to the ideas. And so for this poem, it's how is imagery used in this poem to show the strength of an individual? And so here's what I came up with. The boy is strong physically and also in his resistance to conformity. So not just physically strong, but in his resistance. The teachers condemn him for it while the students worship him for it. The speaker rejects the teacher's view in support of the strongest boy's individuality. Individuality, I think is the better word there. All right, so that's a SCASI without the second S. Now, the second S has to do with imagery, so we know that we need to write about imagery. But I do want to show you this color marking activity, and we'll kind of go beyond imagery in it, just for the sake of showing you all the different things you can do with color marking. All right, so the color marking has a few rules here. First of all, or directions, I guess I should say, you're going to use at least 3 different colors. And after reading the poem a couple of times, trace specific things in the text that jump out at you as being unique or unusual. The second step is to label each of 3 patterns that you traced. And then finally, the third step, make a literal statement about each of the 3 or more patterns. And remember, literal statements are ones that no one could disagree with. They're true. And then make an interpretive statement, one in which you investigate a meaning beyond the literal. All right, so here are some things you could look for when you are color marking. You could look for nouns, verbs, or other parts of speech. You could look for alternative word meanings, definitions, unusual foreign words, regular words used in irregular ways, sensory images, phrases, objects, words of shape or color or texture, time or space words, numbers, people, animals, key sounds like alliteration, assonance, consonants, onomatopoeia. You could look at rhymes. You could look for allusions, historical or mythological references. You could look at objects that can function as symbols like mirrors, landscapes, foods, metals, technology, weather, details, seasons. There's some comments on cultural significance of these different seasons. Repetition, doubles, parallels, symmetry, oppositional pairs. This is one that I used when I color marked this poem. I love oppositional pairs. It's when you're looking for a duality, things that work in opposition to one another because they are against each other. They're opposites, dark, light, right? Like in Flounder. In this poem, we have a lot of different oppositional pairs. Specific letters, specific marks of punctuation, shifts, enjambment, caesura, irregular line breaks, register of speaking, formal, academic, informal, or any recurring item that you notice. So this is about you finding patterns in the poem, something that happens more than once, and then tracing it and watching how it progresses. All right, so let me show you first what I did. When I first tackled it, I thought, well, I'll look at the imagery connected, or the imagery and details connected to the major players, the characters, right? So imagery and details of the strongest boy versus the teachers versus the speaker and the other students. But then once I did that, I was like, oh, wow, I have like the whole poem highlighted, and I don't know how much this is going to help me because I haven't really narrowed down anything. So then I was like, okay, I maybe need to get a little bit more specific. That's a bit too broad. So I didn't go any further with that. And instead I thought, well, why don't I just look at the pronouns and see which people are being described in each stanza. And so I did. And so this is what I found. And I made a literal statement. The poem moves from a focus on the strongest boy. That's all of the he, his, him, his, he, these singular pronouns, right? So it starts with really the focus on him, to the speaker's independent response by the end. We don't see any eyes until line 21. So the speaker, just as an individual, he doesn't reference himself until line 21, and then he does again at the end of the poem, 34 and 35. So here's another way to say it. The focus is on the strongest boy in the first 2 stanzas, how he affects the other students in stanzas 3 and 5, how he affects the teachers in stanza 4, and finally how the speaker is affected in stanza 6. Do I have all of the correct A's and E's for affect and effect? Probably not. You can let me know. Interpretive statement here. The speaker is emboldened by watching The Strongest Boy to recognize his own individuality. What do you think? Here's another one that might work. Worshiping words versus condemning words. Now, those of you who had to go to Sunday school every Sunday growing up like I did, you might right away see the Christian religious terms, and you could phrase it in that way as well. I just wanted to make it show you that you don't have to know Christianity in order to deal with the Christian references. I think you would notice, whether you know much about the Christian religion or not, that we have worshiping words and condemning words, right? So that's why I decided to use that label. And this is an oppositional pair. These are working opposite each other. Some words are worshipful. They're showing that this strongest boy is a hero, a saint, Jesus, right? Samson, Jesus, strongest boy. The students are worshiping him. And the speaker says that he has faith that this strongest boy could rise from the dead. So they're very worshipful terms, right? The condemning words come from the teachers. So here's my literal statement. The speaker uses heroic, worshiping words to describe the strongest boy and condemning words to describe how the teachers feel about him. My interpretive statement, the strongest boy has strong effects on the speaker and his teachers, inspiring worship from one and condemnation from the other. All right, here's another one that I looked at. How about this oppositional pair, conformity versus individuality? I found that the strongest boy is described as unwilling to change his behavior for sports, but as the only one who could do the Iron Cross, while the other students are described as a conforming group. So all of these details are about the strongest boy's individuality, what makes him singular, different than the other members of the group. And then these are really conforming references, images. We moved on to the rope, to the trampoline or pegboard, lined up in identical blue gym shorts and white Fitzgerald High t-shirts with our last names scrawled in the blue center squares. They're identical. They're moving together. They are conforming. Whereas, the strongest boy won't even cut his hair to be on sports, even though he's obviously the strongest boy. Here's the interpretive statement. The strongest boy is admirable, not just because of his physical strength, but because of his strength of independence and refusal to conform to the rules. All right, here's the last one I found, and this has to do with form and structure. I looked at punctuation marks. I do this a lot when I encounter a new poem. I just highlight all of the marks of punctuation. And when you do that, you can notice irregular line breaks really easily. And what I noticed after I did it in this poem was that the 4 middle stanzas do not end with punctuation, and the end lines spill into the next stanza. So if you look at this one, with endless push-ups, you'd think this would be the end of the stanza because it ends with an end-stop line, or that line ends with punctuation. It's an end-stop line. But then look at the next one. He was the only one who could do the Iron Cross. That stanza ends with what seems like the beginning of a new idea. It's certainly the beginning of a new sentence, and it spills into the next stanza. And so that's a very irregular line break. I also noticed that harness is isolated when I looked at the punctuation marks. But maybe I'm not talking about that right now, am I? Okay, I'm going to stay focused. Okay, so the pink, this is another time when the teachers stood. We go from one stanza to the next, even though the sentence is, has not ended in stanza 3. Again, that happens here in stanza 4 to 5, and even in stanzas 5 to 6. So I guess that happens again in the last stanza. The middle stanzas don't follow the conventional rules of verse, and so create a feeling of breaking conformity. Oh, do you see how that mirrors content? Yeah, It's pretty exciting when that happens. So like all of these lines are messing with the conventional structure of poetic lines by having unusual, irregular line breaks. And so it's not following conventional rules of verse, much like The Strongest Boy is not following conformity rules of conforming. Yeah. All right. I think that is all that I have. And now you have a poem that you're going to tackle. And this poem is called Drapery Factory, Gulfport, Mississippi, 1956. And this is a poem of social resistance, and it's a little gross. So just prepare yourself for that. All right. We can talk about the poem if you want some assistance. Otherwise, give it a shot. Scassify it and color mark it. Should be fun.